Neil gets connected up, we'll put these questions up. And the first question that is, I think, probably one of the most obvious questions is, where do you draw the boundary? And the question that's come up on 2 or 3 times is the obvious one, which is, where do you draw the boundary when it comes to sexual ethics? So in other words, what is the gospel? What are gospel issues and what are non-gospel secondary issues or second-tier issues? So I'm going to invite the Honourable Edward Mole to answer that question.
Well, I think a simple answer is that sexual ethics are a first-order question. From my position, I'm within the Church of England. It's very clear that within the Church of England, evangelicals are saying this is a first-order issue over which we can't kind of agree to disagree. While there'll be others who would want to take a different position, the evangelical position would be clear on that. So that's a fairly well-established position.
I mean, Neil, we're not going to all answer all these questions, but do you want to say that's obviously a local, would you say nationally that's kind of where things are landing?
Yes, very much so. I think what I would say is if your endeavour is missional, in other words, it's about getting the gospel out through community involvement, missional engagement, preaching, days in the park, whatever it is, then you have to guard the gospel. And the gospel must be clear and unambiguous to all. And I think that means for these partnerships, that's exactly where you have to land. And it is a first order issue, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you. Tier 1, yeah.
Okay. So kind of the next question is sort of linked to that, is who decides where the boundary lies? And again, Ed, you had the quickest, easiest answer.
Well, it seems to me that for an endeavour of this kind, it's those who are inside the group who decide where the boundary is. You might have to defend that decision, but that's the obvious answer for me.
Okay, this is going well, isn't it, for me? No, the next question is, what about people... Okay, now let's carry on with this. Where do we consider the Roman Catholics lie and the boundary?
I thought that was you. It's your... I think you need to be thinking local as well.
So, I mean, our shorthand has been an evangelical collaboration, and that is because of the view we take on the authority of the Bible. The official Roman Catholic position, that may not be the position of individual Roman Catholic people, but the position of the Roman Catholic Church is that authority doesn't lie only with the Bible, but it lies also with the Church. And that is a significant enough difference that we're going to have trouble working with that. Sorry, you've got your own microphone.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, we may come to this in another question. So there's which churches could be part of something. A different question is, can an individual who is at a church that we would say, well, that's clearly not an evangelical gospel church, could that individual be part of something? Would it be helpful just to draw that distinction, Ben, and one of you comment on that?
Yes.
About individuals rather than the church as an entity.
Yes, I mean, I think it will depend on what the initiative is, won't it? I mean, it'll depend if it's highly organised and requires the leadership to be bought into it, especially when it comes to resources and money, that's going to be more difficult. But if it's just something that is slightly more informal and there's someone who's gifted from another church that doesn't happen to be within the boundary, I don't see that as a problem personally. So it will depend on the nature of the entity. Yeah. I don't know, Ed, whether you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think if you're coming as an individual, it doesn't mean that you are or can bring the church with you unless the church wants to. But if the church doesn't want to, there will still be room for you as an individual. That makes sense to me.
But do you remember the drivers, influencers, participants, and so on? If you were coming as an individual, probably you wouldn't be in a position to be able to be a driver or play a significant leadership role, not least because of what Ben was saying, is the moment you start to talk about interchurch relationships, finances, and other things, your own place in your local church. You're not representing the church in your presence. You're coming in a personal capacity. So I think of those circles, you could probably be a participant, which means you could be a volunteer helping out at the Open Doors Friendship Centre, but you probably wouldn't be in a position to be able to give leadership directly to it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is one more about the kind of the global Christian question. How do we unite global Christians or integrate them into the indigenous Christian kind of framework, whilst them still remaining loyal to their own cultural groups and things that happen? I mean, probably you have the best place to speak into that, Neil. I mean, I'd have some thoughts locally, but...
Yeah, well, just to say, some of you were at that seminar, and if you are, do share what we discussed, because good thoughts were coming from the floor. I think what we thought was absolutely crucial was that it should be understood as a giving and receiving relationship. That, in other words, we're not inviting people in to become like us. What we're saying is that God has given you and your own culture gifts to the church. So for me, I've been taught to pray by my African brothers and sisters, and Koreans as well, actually. Just teach me. You know, Jesus' disciples asked, teach us to pray. Well, who's going to teach us to pray now? There's no one quite like some of my African brothers and sisters who show me how to pray with faith. So I think the giving and receiving should allow someone to feel, I'm not an object in this church expected to conform, but I'm bringing everything that God has made me and all that I am into the life of this church, and it's honored, recognized, valued, given opportunity for expression within the local context of the church. Celebrated would be the key word, and that allows people to feel integrally part of that church.
Okay, so just to kind of follow on from that, you may have covered it in your seminar, but then how do we move beyond the Sunday, particularly for global Christians, beyond the Sunday gathering that is relative, depending on the size of the gathering, can be more impersonal. How do we move that into a midweek, more personal, smaller setting? How do we, because that definitely, speaking from a Bridgwater perspective, that's a challenge that we have, and probably the same in Taunton to an extent, and I'm sure it's the same in other small, medium-sized market towns across the land that are quite traditionally white, middle working class.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, or anyone from the floor, really? Any thoughts on that?
Eat together. Get in each other's homes, eat together, do as best as you can, life on life. If there are ways in which you can help them with their challenges of contextualizing to the UK, maybe even filling in a tax form or whatever else it might be, offer to serve them, but seek to be blessed and receive from them in the context of family and home, which is very significant to people from many cultures, which is why tea and coffee, particularly church tea and coffee, after a service doesn't quite cut it. Yeah. But and you won't be able to do that with everyone, but just have a means even amongst your leadership to say, who are we prioritizing and spending time with, and how do we build those relationships of trust? Yeah.
Any more thoughts beyond that in the room? Ideas? Oh.
Well, I'll just say for our setting, I'm still working on this. I'm aware that there is a kind of scale from welcome to inclusion, involvement, partnership, something. I'm not sure the exact terminology, but there are different ways. I'm conscious of that scale. I'm conscious that we're not far enough up the scale, and we're thinking, I want to think about how to do that. But I want folk at St George's to know that it's not enough just to say we've got brothers and sisters from elsewhere in the world. That's great. They're not shaping the way we do church yet, and so we have got a number of steps to go through.
Yeah, so any more thoughts on that from anything that people got experience that's worked really well, and how to integrate people from other nations more into the everyday life as opposed to just the Sunday morning?
I think just the fact that we are wrestling with it, and it's a don't know yet, but if we're asking that question, that is a good step. And that may be as far as we've gotten today.
Two.
Right. Okay. Food. So food again. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, sorry. So a community feast once a month. So food, absolutely. I know certainly in living like Taunton, we've done that. We're challenged with that. We don't have a building here in Bridgwater. We rent. So doing food feasts is difficult, more difficult. We've got to be a little bit more innovative. Someone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I mean, I don't want to pick on Florence or Selma or Shakina or Alice or, anyone really in the room, but, anything that you feel you'd want to share as to how to help us do a better job, of how, Dan, I come to you. Florence, do you feel anything? Do you want to come up and, the microphone won't reach, that's all, I don't think.
I come from Africa, Zimbabwe. From our cultural beliefs, we believe that having people in your home is the greatest thing that you can have. So if people are meant to be part of you, they have to be able to come to your home at any time other than meeting in the park. We believe also on home groups, meeting and socializing, sharing the gospel in the home. Even our children meeting, not only meeting during Sunday meetings, but meeting any other times outside Sunday meetings.
Thank you.
No, that's great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much, Florence. I didn't mean to kind of pick on you, but it's just we need to hear different perspectives sometimes. And just interesting kind of testimony just in exactly that, having a family, the whole family, actually they're from Nigeria, and we had them into our home for a meal, and it just broke, you're right, it broke all the barriers, completely blown away. They said, well, back home the pastor would never have us into their home to share a meal, they'd have us into home not to share a meal, and so, and I really, isn't that what you do? Isn't it practice hospitality? Isn't that biblical? And so, it's food again, isn't it? Homes and food. It's not. We don't really need buildings. I know everyone's excited because it's food again. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. What is the role of Ephesians 4 ministries in helping to facilitate cross-church activity or unity in a town? I'm going to go to Neil for that.
Thank you. So for those of you who are not sure quite what that means, Ephesians 4 verses 11 and 12 talks about Jesus giving gifts to the church. And usually we think, oh, what do you mean, sort of, gift of preaching or gift of tongues or whatever. Here he's talking about people. So Jesus gave gifts to the church, and it says he gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be shepherds, pastor, teachers. And so sometimes that's called the fivefold gifting, and many Christians think in one way or another that continues through to the present day, that we ought to recognize some who are gifted as apostles. That's a lowercase a. That doesn't mean they get to write the Bible, but, lowercase a, apostle. Some function in the role of prophets, some evangelists, shepherds, and teachers, which I think most of us would naturally identify and spot with. So I think if we're going to use that vocabulary, and it won't be everyone wants to use that, but some do, and some church traditions do. The apostolic, I think, are really the pioneers. So it's the Apostle Paul who would go and break new ground and travel and take the gospel where people had not previously heard. So most people think of the apostolic as people who are in leadership but in a pioneering context and are leading the way on behalf of the church. So as we think about the partnerships that we may or may not be involved with, the catalyst sort of functions with some of that apostolic gifting because they connect with leaders, but then they seem to have a God-given role, an authority, sort of, to convene leaders. So when they say, would you come, the leaders will come because it's that person that's asking them to. And then they then facilitate and try to bring into being this new idea for the church, for mission, for outreach, and so on. So I think that's primarily what most people would think of in terms of the apostolic. If you read Alan Hirsch and his works on the forgotten ways, that's where he would put it. The prophetic is those who would come with a particular voice to say, God is calling us to this, that this is something that we must do rather than here's an idea that we could do. So we talked about, I think, wasn't it in the last session? We looked and said that they have both the catalyst has a prophetic voice and a servant voice. But the prophetic voice is basically, this is, Jesus is calling us to this. And so when Ben introduced the whole Bridgwater Convention, that was the sort of language that he used, that this was a response to something that you believe God was calling you to do, and that was a prophetic voice, we would say. So when someone talks about the fivefold gifting in Ephesians, that's what they mean is, are we sensing the apostolic or the prophetic to be at work in the context of building these collaborative endeavors? And I'm saying yes, in those kinds of ways. Yeah. Is that? I don't know who asked the question. I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I think another one for you, Neil. What's been your biggest lesson while connecting churches together?
Oh, it's so hard to think of a single, but just what I've learned is to love diversity, and diversity is now for me a value. I want to see it. I don't want Christians to all be like me, and I'm disappointed if I walk in a room and everyone looks like me. So the biggest lesson is God has made such a beautiful bride, and we need to see that bride in all of her glory. And so I still get frustrated when people put up the barriers, hide behind their denominations, and don't see and sense what God is calling the church to be. So I think I just want to encourage you to take that step of faith, to make those relationships with Christians who are a little bit different from yourself and in different churches, and to quotes, get over ourselves, and then to enjoy that reality. So I didn't get there overnight. I would say that was a journey of between 5 years and more. But it's lovely that my best friend in Birmingham, my best friend in London are two Christians from very different traditions from my own. One New Frontiers guy in Birmingham, the other guy in London, an African Pentecostal. And I could never have dreamt when I moved to London that my best friend would be an African Pentecostal. It was just like, how did that happen? But yeah, amazing, yeah.
Great, thanks, Neil. Okay, I'm going to ask this one to Ed. How do you help new believers know which church to attend when their conversion comes from a corporate mission?
Well, clearly I'm going to say you should join a church that is going to help you grow in discipleship. And in simple terms, that's going to be a church that's going to help you learn to follow Jesus by reading the Bible and put it into practice. I think a fair rule of thumb is if this partnership is a collaboration in the terms that we've talked about and has a common basis in the gospel, then the partners in that organization would be the obvious first place to look, because they've had to have a common basis in the gospel to start. I think after that it's a matter of wisdom, and I think it's, I don't quite know exactly what lies behind the question, but it's fine to go to churches and say, I'm a new Christian, are you a kind of church that will help me grow as a Christian? How are you going to do it? Can you help me find a church where I'm going to land? If you come to me, I'll say, look, if we can help you, we'd love to help you, but the most important thing for me is that you land in a church where you will thrive. If it's our church, we'll be delighted. If it's another church, we'll also be delighted. But
Yeah.
I'll put your good above our gain, and I'm sure every other church leader will want to do the same as well.
Well said. Yeah.
Is that fair?
Very good. Can I just ask, on that is, so what you're suggesting is to have a new believer discern correctly to make the choice for themselves. So there's going to be things they're going to need to, what is going to help them thrive and grow? So we can tell them, but it's like for they themselves, they're going to know how are they going to best engage the scripture, a lively church. And so you're saying, here's the things that you generally need, Bible believing, etc., etc. But outside of that, there are some things that you need to personally consider and answer after you decide.
Well, in concrete terms, if you're involved in helping someone come to faith, or you're near them when they come to faith, you're in a position to say, look, from what I know in the town, these are the churches that are going to help you grow as a Christian. But we occasionally, and anecdotally around the country, we are seeing people just turn up on their own and say, how did you become a Christian? Through TikTok. Okay, so you have to trust in the sovereign God that they will eventually land them at a church that is going to give them a good answer. Yeah. But if they come, to one of these churches, those would be the kind of answers I'd want to give. Yeah. So.
Even if this person comes to know that they want through your ministry, I want to take them to a church they can fill with them, even if it's outside my comfort zone. Where you go, I'll come with you.
That's lovely.
Oh, yeah. Take them, yeah. That's right. I mean, you want them to land in a church where they are going to flourish. And if it's just if the person has come to faith with you nearby, it's your responsibility to help plant them somewhere. If they randomly turn up at your church, your responsibility is to plant them somewhere good rather than get them in your church. But I don't think that's controversial.
To your point, which is a sad but too often told story, I would say go to a church where you would be missed if you weren't there. Someone would know if you weren't there. So I've pastored in a church where lots of students would come through, and I would say, I don't care whether you come to our church or not, would love to have you, but a church is a family. So if your family doesn't miss you when you're not there, don't go to a church where they wouldn't even know if you're not there. That's almost good because you need that pastoral care.
You're welcome to St. George's anytime.
Okay, yeah, good. Okay, this is an interesting one. In Titus, Paul commands a rebuke to those whose cultural behaviours are inconsistent with the gospel. How can we address this with foreign cultures? I think we need to address it with our own culture first, I would say. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, any comments, Ed? I mean, you just do it like you do any other culture. You just...
Well, we talked about this in the seminar
okay.
in here, and that text may have come because we looked at that verse from Titus 1 where Paul actually says, Cretians are lazy, idle, and so on and so on. I would just say what we discussed was that every culture, in every culture we reflect the image of God well, and in every culture we fail to reflect the image of God in the ways that we should. So we need to start with ourselves, but enter into conversations as is appropriate with others to say, what is it that you see in our culture that you think means we're not serving Jesus as well as we should, and then hope that they return the question or at least enter into it. But start with yourself, basically. Say, what do you think of British sort of Christianity? What do you notice, or what's really different for you? And say, and they might say, I really appreciate this and really appreciate that, but we miss this from where I come from, which was so important to us. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. I think one more question, if that's okay, before we pray, and it's about prayer. This is a sad kind of question, really. Do you know any good examples of UK town, city-wide churches praying together? I mean, any. There must be. Oh dear.
There are four, because London's so big, I know of 4 movements in London where they have developed an intentional strategy to pray. It's not, though, at a very local level. So I'm not sure I can share the details of those with you. One of them even developed an app where they wanted every street in London to be prayed for in a prayer walk. And the idea was, as you walk that street, you would then add it into the app, and they were going to build up this soon. So I've seen one or two really quite innovative ideas like that, but it's not really quite praying together because it's you on your own through an app trying to build up this picture of London. So, no.
Yeah. Bruce, come on, you come on.
I mean, just to let you know, in Taunton, we've had some amazing times over the last couple of years and have actually been committed to praying together and fasting for probably 3 weeks out of a year. And there have been really significant times where we've all got together. So we would meet in the mornings at 6:30 on Zoom. And then there would be something happening at lunchtime in town, normally at, Somerset House of Prayer. And then we would meet in the evenings in one of the different churches and pray together. We'd put together booklets and just seek the Lord together. It's been absolutely amazing, really beautiful times. We started it last year, or was it the year before now? I can't remember, but it's been going for quite some time, and it's been absolutely beautiful just to see so many brothers and sisters come, from across the town. 3 times a year is kind of our goal to pray and fast for a week at a time.
Great.
But something I would just say, an observation really about that is that I think if we can't pray together in our own churches, it's not going to happen at a town-wide level, and that's the challenge. So I think if we cannot envision people with the priority and importance of prayer as leaders in our own churches, how are we going to expect it to happen in a less? But I do think we need to explore the different expressions of prayer, among us. I'm looking at Chris, who helps to head up Somerset House of Prayer and has really kind of pioneered this. But I do think, as a nation, this is a key field for how the global Christians can help us.
Yeah.
But I haven't quite unlocked how that works in a little town like Bridgwater or Taunton yet, because most of the town-wide type of prayer that I've been to, they're not there. Sometimes because of shift work and all sorts of good reasons. But I'm looking. Africa, they know how to pray for their nation. We don't really yet. We're getting a bit more desperate because our nation's getting more desperate. But when I've been to Nairobi with a church of 2,000 people in the only permanent building in that area, the rest is all shanty, and then they say, pray for your nation, let's pray for the nation, the roof comes off because they're desperate for their nation. We're not yet there. I think we're getting closer. I'm looking forward to those days. It's because I think when your nation, we'll be on our knees for our nation when we realize our nation needs it, and it's getting close. So I think we're feeling it more, the need to pray, because nothing else is working. Anyway, that's a bit of a personal comment. Let's pray for Bridgwater for the few minutes. Norman, do you want to come up and join us? I know you don't want to, but we'd like you to. Yeah, any other church leaders who would like to come up? Bruce, you come up. Anyone else from Bridgwater, particularly? Chris, you come up. Peter, where's Peter still here? No, okay. Chris, yeah, you come too, yeah. Representing House of Prayer. Okay, would you mind standing up? Okay. This is where we all pray in different ways, and so this is why corporate prayer is across different expressions is more difficult, but we can do it. We can do it. Okay, we're going to focus specifically on praying for Bridgwater. Let's all just begin. We can all pray at the same time to begin with. God has